Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at a specific concept that is at the crux of Module B and kind of is supposed to inform our entire analysis of the text that we're supposed to be studying, but often gets lost in the mumbo jumbo of advanced English and its rubric. So without further ado, let's get started with episode 2 of... Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today, if you haven't guessed it already, is textual integrity. It's a term that we're told is incredibly important to Module B, but one we're not as sure about. So today what we're going to do is we're going to break down what textual integrity is, and then also understand how do we incorporate textual integrity into our essays. Now, step number 1 is actually understanding what does textual integrity refer to. So when you want to understand textual integrity, or if you continually kind of forget what textual integrity means, associate it with structural integrity of like a building. So when a building is made, first we lay the foundations. And if the foundations are strong and the material that is used to make the building is strong and everything goes into place and the building looks beautiful and it serves a meaningful purpose to the public, then that building is around for a really, really long time. For example, the Sydney Opera House. It's built beautifully, it has really strong foundations, it's innovative in its design, and it's regularly used, right? That's why it's still something that people go to and it's still relevant. Similarly, textual integrity is about texts having strong foundations, being made with innovative and artistic voices and characters or structures, and talking about themes that are timeless, that are essentially universal to the human condition, regardless of your race, your gender, your sex, your sexual orientation, whatever it is. And that's pretty much what every single Module B text is doing. And all you're asked to do is prove it. So it's kind of like you already have the answer and you're just supposed to show you're working out. Now, in order to do that, what we want to first look at is what specific features we want to be looking at within textual integrity. So let's come down here. Textual integrity. What does this comprise of? Textual integrity essentially comprises of 4 things. Within textual integrity, we have our purpose. So the purpose is the author's purpose. And then what we look at is how did the author or composer achieve their purpose, right? So that's where we come to form, structure, and language features. What does form refer to? So for example, let's say you're studying Jane Austen's Emma, your form would be a novel. If you're studying T.S. Eliot, your form would be poetry. So let's take T.S. Eliot again. A lot of my examples are going to be based on T.S. Eliot because I studied T.S. Eliot in year 12 really extensively. But if there's a particular text that you would like some help with to understand a particular concept within that text, please let me know in the comments below and I'd be happy to get to it. Okay, continuing on with form. So form is poetry. And keep in mind, guys, even if you're not doing T.S. Eliot, it's all about learning this skill, understanding this base concept. And then you can apply it to whatever text it is that you're studying. Next is structure. What is the kind of structure he uses? So T.S. Eliot largely writes either free verse or stream of consciousness style poem. Like his characters are written in a stream of consciousness style. That's what frames the poem, such as Proof Rock, stream of consciousness. Spelt it right this time, I think. And now we look at language features, and this is the important part. When a lot of students think about language features, they think, oh yeah, simile, metaphor, symbolism, yada, yada, yada. But what you want to be doing, especially in Module B, what you should be doing this in all modules, but especially in Module B, you should be looking at language features that are specific to that particular text. For example, if you're looking at a play or a film, you should be looking at language features such as mise-en-scène. Mise-en-scène is essentially what's on the scene, what makes up the composition of the scene. Or, things like lighting, staging, like body movement, facial expressions. Those are the techniques that you should be going hard on. If you're at film, you take one step further and you go into things like cuts, fades, cross-cuts, montages, which is something that plays don't have. But the point is that you should be sticking to things that are incredibly specific to your particular text. So in our case, if we're looking at a poem, what we want to be looking at in particular is things like diction and syntax. Diction, syntax, rhyme, caesura, and you can even look at things like punctuation or lack of punctuation a lot of times, which is enjambment. And what you'll see is that all these techniques come together, right? All these techniques are working together to give you one specific message. And that's what textual integrity is about. It's about how does form, language features, and structure, how do the three of those work together to achieve the author's purpose? Before you start your essay, you need to do this step, and we're going to learn why. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at the module Rubric and see what it actually says about textual integrity. So the line we're going to be looking at is in the first paragraph. It's the second sentence, and this is how it reads. Through increasingly informed and personal responses to the text in its entirety, students understand the distinctive qualities of the text, notions of textual integrity, and significance. See, one thing I want you to understand about textual integrity is that if your text has textual integrity, which if you're doing Module B, all of your texts do, then your text has defined temporal parameters like time and setting, i.e., it is timeless. Your text is timeless, but that's because of two things. It's not just your text talks about universal concerns, but also the fact that it talks about them in a way that is fresh, engaging, and innovative hundreds of years later. I hope that makes sense. Now here it says, understand the distinctive qualities of the text. So distinctive qualities of the text means that you need to look at something specific that this person has done. If we're studying T.S. Eliot, there's a reason we're learning about the hollowness and superficiality of modernity through T.S. Eliot. Lots of people wrote texts, poems about that particular thing. But why are we studying T.S. Eliot? Right? That's question number one. Question number two, why did he write a poem? Right? It's not just that, he didn't have money to make a movie, or he didn't know how to write plays, or he didn't know how to write short stories or novels. He specifically chose the poetic medium. Why? Now, we know that poetry as a medium is incredibly subjective. It's inherently subjective. It relies on the reader to put together the images and feelings that the composer is trying to evoke to create a meaning themselves. Why did Eliot make people go through this process? Why did he choose poetry? Why did he choose stream of consciousness as the writing style for a lot of his personas? Why did he use free verse? And then lastly, how do the language features, diction, syntax, rhymes, caesura, enjambment, these are just a few, this is not an exhaustive list, how do these language features work to help Eliot harness the poetic form and achieve his purpose? These are all the questions that you need to be asking before you start writing your essay. So as you can see here, I haven't specified a theme because this can be about any theme. You can be writing about any particular insight that you have learned about the human condition through T.S. Eliot, and it doesn't have to be a specific one. But for each insight, you do have to do this process and kind of make the reader or your marker understand that you know why this text has textual integrity and you know why you're studying it almost 100 years later. And the biggest reason is that it has enduring relevance, right? Your text is still relevant because it's still talking about concerns that are affecting us on a daily basis, right? And you always want to bring that in. A big part of Module B, like it says here, is through increasingly informed and personal responses to the text. This means that you as a student, particularly you, need to make a personal connection with the text, which means that, for example, in T.S. Eliot, he says a line that goes, to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet, right? He is talking about how anytime he goes out, he has to first prepare his personality. And that's something that's so incredibly relevant to people in our generation with the advent of things like social media. There are so many different personalities that we have curated. There's Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and we're different on each of them. So when we're going out, it's like, okay, I'm meeting someone who I'm friends with on Instagram, or if I'm meeting someone who I'm friends with on Facebook. But the point is that every step of the way, you're supposed to make personal connections with the text. That's what this module is heavily reliant on. And that's why this is one of the modules that allows you to even write in the first person if you wanted to. Now, the last thing we want to look at is how do we incorporate a meaningful discussion of textual integrity in our essays. What happens a lot of the time is that we kind of we make our argument, and then at the end we write down, thus T.S. Eliot's poetry has enduring relevance, and we kind of move on. But that's not exactly the way to do it. That's not the best way to do it, and it's very obvious to the market that it's just something that you've tacked on at the end. The first thing that we need to realize is that you need to have a discussion of textual integrity in your introduction. Just a quick discussion, such as for T.S. Eliot, I wrote something like, ultimately T.S. Eliot harnesses the poetic form through an innovative stream of consciousness writing style to explore XYZ purpose, or the timeless concern of hollowness, or the concern of a hollow modernity or hollow existence, that hollow modernity that pervades our existence to this day. So what I've done there is that I've said T.S. Eliot harnesses the poetic form. I've said the exact structure that he uses. Don't mention techniques. I know a lot of students kind of get in the habit of mentioning techniques. You absolutely don't need to do that. And then the last thing I've said is I've made a link between the theme that he explores and its link to modern day. So I've said he explores sense of hollowness that pervades modern existence to this day. Right? Now, in that part, I have just written down, pretty much outlined what it is that I'm going to be talking about within my essay. Now, that's for the introduction. How do we approach this for the body paragraph? So the body paragraphs are a little bit different, but not all that much. Now, what happens in the body paragraph is that you get specific about the particular structural device that T.S. Eliot is using. So the way that I go about my Mod B essays, at least for T.S. Eliot, is that I wrote 3 body paragraphs looking at 3 poems. So each body paragraph for each poem, which I found the simplest way to approach. If you need help with essay structure, I'm going to be making a video on that as well. So watch out for that, that's coming soon. So the way that I would explore it in a body paragraph is that I would open the body paragraph by stating how the structural device is functioning within that particular poem. For example, let's look at how I did it for Prufrock, the poem. So the left song of J. Alfred Prufrock's stream of consciousness style structurally symbolizes the persona's crippling social paranoia that results from pervasive superficiality in the modern era. So that's how I opened. Now, in that particular sentence, I highlighted the structural device that is working or that is at play, which is the stream of consciousness writing style, and I also highlight what purpose that device is serving. Now, here's my link to the modern day. Accordingly, the synecdoche in Prufrock's confession, to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet, reduces social identity to mere masks, resonating no less powerfully with our own milieu, dominated by self-promotion through social media. Now, once again, I've taken something that Eliot is exploring and then made a succinct connection to our own era. So make sure that you're not spending too long explaining the threads between the two. It's fine if it's your first draft, but you want to be redrafting again and again to make sure that your essay is as succinct as possible. And the conclusion of my paragraph is, thus, for his era and indeed our own, Eliot profoundly exposes the modern world's inescapable hollowness. So the way that my essay worked is that I had one argument that I built through 3 different poems, right? So in my first paragraph, I've talked about how Eliot is using stream of consciousness to structurally symbolize a persona's inner anxieties. I've also made a link to our modern day, and at the end, I've concluded with saying that he is voicing the inescapable hollowness for both his era and our own. And now here's my opening point for my second paragraph, and I'm continually building this argument. While the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and the Hollow Men are distinctly modernist in their anxieties regarding unbridled industrialization, the poems continue to resonate with audiences through their structurally innovative exploration of society's continued desperate attempts to reenact defunct intellectual and ritualistic traditions. So you'll see here that there's a key difference between my response and a lot of responses that you might be writing at this stage, which is that a lot of you guys might get up to half of what I wrote. which is, while the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and the Hollow Men are distinctly modernist in their anxieties regarding unbridled industrialization, the poems continue to resonate with audiences. That's where a lot of students would stop. But we have to go that extra step where we explain it continues to resonate with audiences through their structurally innovative exploration of society's continued desperate attempts to reenact defunct and ritualistic traditions. So now in my opening sentence, or my topic sentence, I've said that both of these are innovatively using structure, right? Both Prufrock and Holloman. I've also already explained in my first paragraph how Prufrock explores its concerns through structure. Now we're going to be looking at how Holloman does it. So because my first line said that Holloman uses its structure innovatively, now I need to say how. A lot of students, the mistake that we make is that we just move on. So the next thing is, in contrast to the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock setting of perfunctory social etiquette, the Holloman recurringly employs purgatorial allusion to portray Western culture as paralyzed by spiritual and ethical confusion. Great. Now I have explained how the Holloman is using structure. I have told the audience, or I've signposted, that the way that Eliot is doing this is innovative. And then I just go into my language features and analysis. And I keep this purgatorial allusion as a key part of my analysis. And I refer back to it halfway through my paragraph. I say, inevitably, Eliot is depicting a world in which humanity's tendency for subjective thought has alienated it from the spiritual realm, a notion enhanced by Eliot's recurrent reference to a Dantean conception of purgatory, in which the modern individual allegorically sits gathered on this beach of the tumid river sightless, punished for their lack of moral conviction, and indefinitely disconnected from the multifoliate rows of death's twilight kingdom. So this part at the end, or near the end, is talking about, once again, like how that Dantean purgatory that I talked about in my introduction to this body paragraph is functioning. It's really, really important that we stick to what we say in our topic sentence, because that's what the topic sentence is for. The topic sentence is supposed to outline what we're going to be talking about. And now my conclusion goes as follows. Through this dominant motif of an intermediary realm of the shadow, Eliot depicts a European landscape within which moral ambiguity has contributed to the fracturing of humanity's connection to the spiritual. So up till here, I have talked about how humanity is, or society is really superficial. And in the second paragraph, I've talked about how its connection to the spiritual has been fractured. Right? I've explored two facets of what's wrong with modern society. And I've also talked about how structure has helped us understand that particular idea. Now have a look at how I'm referring to structure in my opening sentence of my third paragraph. So I refer to Journey of the Magi as just Magi. You can do that as long as you specify that in your introduction. Consequently, the retrospective narrative of Magi explores complex spirituality as a source of redemption for materialistic and immoral modernity. So the retrospective narrative, I've once again signposted the kind of way that Eliot has used structure within his poem. Then another structural feature that I've used is, additionally, this notion of the via negativa within Magi is further deconstructed in the analysis of literary critic. It doesn't matter. But the point there is the via negativa, which means that you go through the negative way. And I then talk about, and I chose a quote that specifically deconstructed and supported the argument that I had already made, which was that T.S. Eliot was, subverting that traditional narrative of Jesus' birth as, incredibly jubilant and the three wise men getting there really quickly, to show how having a true connection to spirituality is a lot more complex than just blindly accepting everything. And all through that, I am making sure that I'm referring and explaining how this particular structure works. And if you're going down that route of structure, which you really should, you should go down that route of structure, you should go down that route of poetry, because it's really, really important. You should know that. And even if the question isn't directly asking you about structure or poetry, about structure or form or textual integrity, as a Module B essay, you're expected to have insightful discussions about all three of those built into your essay. And I'll show you an example of how I was also using language features that was specific to poetry. So the last line of the last sentence of my paragraph, of my last body paragraph reads, "The enlightened death to the material world." So this is the enlightened death is referring to the death that the persona goes through at the end of the journey of the Magi. Renders the climax of Magi antithetical to Prufrock and the Hollow Men, as the high modality of "I should be glad of another death" suggests a redemption of the human soul, albeit within the familiarly morbid diction that so characterizes the poet's work. So I use techniques like the high modality and morbid diction. So using language features that are specific to your particular text will not only show you, marker, that you have a great understanding of how your form works, but it will also help you analyze your text a lot better. Because if you're approaching a poem and the only techniques that you're really confident about are similes, metaphors, and symbolism, then you're missing out on so many things like enjambment, rhyme, structure, and things like diction. Diction just means like your choice of words. Syntax just means the way those words are arranged. And that is how poetry creates meaning. And if you're not comfortable with those types of techniques, we're going to find poetry really hard. And that's why I found poetry so hard, because I was not familiarizing myself with the actual techniques that help convey meaning in that particular text. Now, hopefully you were able to walk away from this with a more concrete understanding of what textual integrity actually refers to, and also how you can have a meaningful discussion of textual integrity within your own essays. A lot of it is just talking about things like structure, form, and just saying those to achieve this particular purpose. And then at the end you say, Eliot's poetry transcends his contextual period because of XYZ reasons. And those XYZ reasons need to be both the fact that he has an innovative writing style, and also that he's talking about concerns that are timeless to the human condition. Universal to the human condition. Right? And this extends to every single Mudbee text. And that's it. Thank you so much for coming to class. And as always, remember to take a shower. That's good.